Well, greetings on a journey. We're looking at the book Beyond Question. As a way of summarizing the course that I taught at Luther Seminary, January 14, 15, 16, on using the book Beyond Question for your Lenten series, the Transformative Personal Journey. In this video, the second video, I'm going to cover the Lent 1 and Lent 2 on what we did at the class. And if you have the book, that's very helpful. Keep that in front of you. We'll be looking at that. And if you have run off the course notes that are on the files on this Facebook page, and then also the Beyond video talks, they're all on file on this Facebook page. So run those off, have them in front of you, and it'll make this very helpful. Page 17, session 3. Preaching as a preaching and worship presentation. Preaching as a transformative personal journey through Lent. What I ran off there on page 17 is my draft. It's a first draft that I submitted to my editor. So were editings before it got into the chapter 5 on preaching on purpose in the book Leading on Purpose. Wanted to put that in. It may be a slight copyright violation, but it's only for the, a small group of people. So, dear Lord, please, Beth Lewis, please forgive me for what I have sinned. But it kind of gives a perspective on the way that I approach preaching in this. I taught this book at Luther Seminary at a KAIROS course for 6 consecutive years, and so I summarized it in there. Page 17, just read through some of that about the importance of life application preaching and application preaching for life change. I used to preach, really nice, great theological sermons, but I used to, at least the way I was trained at seminary, is I used to leave the application up to the Holy Spirit. I would preach proclamation, Jesus is risen, and I would preach exhortation a little bit, and we should believe in Him, and we should come to church, and we should read our Bibles, but never got to the third step of application. Well, the way I was taught at seminary was that you leave the application or the living out of it up to the Holy Spirit. And obviously that's true. On the other hand, what I came to realize is that if you only preach proclamation and a little bit of exhortation, you never get to application, and people leave on Sunday morning and say, so what? So what? It's all nice truths saying, my shirt is blue. Okay, that's true. But how is it going to grab you? What difference is going to make in your life? And I came to the conclusion that if I wasn't making a difference in people's lives, if I wasn't doing something that helped them on their journey, on the pathway toward becoming fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ, then I was telling them nice little pious truths in sermons, but it wasn't doing anything to them. Holy Spirit does things. Yes, we can talk all day about that, but I'm responsible also for maybe cracking open some hearts, opening some minds for the Holy Spirit to work. I don't believe that God is always a sledgehammer God. Yes, God opened hearts. Yes, God's open minds, but is there some way in which we can preach and teach life application stuff? At Zion in Redmond, I tell them all the time that what we're going to do is we're going to learn biblical insights and life lessons that will directly apply the biblical truths which never change to a world, to people's lives that are always changing. So how do we do that? Well, we preach life application sermons, I think. Look at page 18. Thinking, feeling, and acting like Jesus. I write in there halfway through the page. Just maybe pause and read through these pages through page 24. Just kind of get a sense for that. But on page 18, I'm a strong ENTJ on the Myers-Briggs. Strong on the T. I used to love preaching T sermons, logical, linear, making sense, exegetical. You know, I mean, they were great sermons from a T point of view, but I realized I was missing a lot of people in the pew because I found that very few people were as extroverted and as T on the Myers-Briggs as me. So I was preaching to a group of people whose minds were not receiving the great biblical nuggets that I was hoping to place into the mouths of the hungry birds in the pews, just kind of waiting to receive this golden piece of, I mean, come on. I missed a lot in my early years of preaching. Now I think page 19, it's important to do those three things in bold in the middle of the page. Enlighten the mind of the people so that they can think like Jesus in their convictions. Engage the emotions so that they can feel like Jesus in their character and their heart. Challenge the will so that people can act with their hands like Jesus did in their conduct. To think and feel and act, that trilogy of thinking, feeling, and acting. I'll tell you. During my early years of preaching, I preached to the head. I preached to the head. And people used to say, you know, oftentimes people miss heaven because of the 18 inches between their head and their heart, and certainly never made it to their hands. So I became convinced that the trilogy of engaging the mind and enlightening the mind, engaging the emotions, and challenging the will, just look at that. Lectionary preaching is that at the bottom of page 19, 20, page 21, from information to transformation. During my early years of a pastor, I gave out a whole lot of information. Did it change anyone's life? A little bit? Maybe. But now I feel that in my preaching and teaching that it does help change people's lives, help bring them, draw them into a relationship with Jesus Christ in a transformative personal journey through Lent. There's that funny story in the middle of page 21 where I'd use the pulpit as a social sounding block. I'm sick and tired of sermons that I go to different places or synod assemblies and I hear a social action speech. You know, I mean, that is a part of what we do, but we're much more. We're about a relationship with Jesus Christ. Social action may follow from that, but it's not the primary thing. We're out there, I think, to change hearts and wills and minds to become closer to knowing Jesus more fully. That's a personal perspective that I come from. Obviously, you can see I'm more kind of evangelical in my heart, in the way that I approach ministry. That's what I've grown to over these years. Page 22, from presentation to asking for a response or commitment. If you get over the sense of a response or a commitment is works, nobody's suggesting that any response or commitment saves us, but it is a result of being saved. When you know Jesus, it does have specific life change that we look that results. Personal perspective, but that will be helpful to remember as we go through this. Page 25, the where is your faith? It's that story of when he got into the boat with the disciples. The whole thing went to heck in a handbasket, and the storm came up. Jesus says, where's your faith? It's a question of commitment. First week was a question of identity, because what we're looking for in response to the question, what are you looking for, tells a story of who we are. Where is your faith is a question of commitment. So we're beginning with identity, then we're going to commitment. As we see that, let me just make a reference to the book. If you would take out the book and look at the table of contents right at the beginning of the book, it's page 7. Maybe write these words down as a kind of a preview of what's coming up. Journey week 1. What are you looking for? It's a question of identity. Journey week 2, where is your faith? A question of commitment. Journey week 3, Jesus says, who do you say that I am? It's a question of Christology. As I was organizing this book and this journey, I didn't want to start with the question, who do you say that I am? Because I wanted to start with the question of identity and commitment. Identity tells you who you are. Commitment, we'll look at that in just a moment. But Next session, we'll be talking about the question, who do you say that I am? The question of Christology. You might want to write these in the table of contents just so that you see the flow. Journey week 4. What do you want me to do for you? Big, massive question. What do you want me to do for you? Well, the reason that's week 4 is that after the question of identity on what you're looking for, tells the story of who you are, question of commitment, a question of Christology, Journey week 4, it's a question of soteriology. What do you believe that Jesus can do for you based on who you've said he is, where your commitments are, and what you're looking for? Journey week 5, fascinating. It's kind of starts to get to the culmination of what this thing is about. Week 5 is based on the question, do you love me? Weeks 4 and 5, actually 5 and 6 are the questions on post-resurrection questions. Jesus on the beach, and then Jesus on the road to Emmaus, week 6. But the question, do you love me? Fascinating, and we'll see the different words that Jesus uses for love. We'll get to that, but just kind of mark that in your head. Journey week 6 is a question of credibility. Jesus says, do you believe what I say? And then the 5 days of week 6 are the road to Emmaus text. Fascinating that Jesus asks 5 questions on the road to Emmaus. 5 questions in that post-resurrection experience. And then journey week 7 is the question, whom are you looking for? The question of sovereignty. Identity, commitment, Christology, soteriology, question of the heart in week 5, question of credibility 6, and sovereignty week 7. So back to the notebook. Back to the notebook, we're on page 25. Where is your faith? If you look on page 26, again, those are notes that I took from the books in the bibliography at the back. About a little more than halfway down, Carter. I think this is fascinating. When Jesus says, where is your faith? That sentence there, you could preach a whole sermon on this. To our grandparents, faith was an experience. To our parents, faith was an inheritance. To us, faith is a convenience. To our children, faith is a nuisance. Think about those concepts. What has happened over the generations to go from an experience to a nuisance? How can we help our kids maybe capture what that experience with the living and loving Lord does to them, to their hearts and to their lives and to their perspective on life? Page 26, page 27, 3/4 of the way down, Tenney suggests that fear is the opposite of faith, not doubt. Fear kept the disciples rowing, you know, the whole fear factor. Preached a sermon one time on fear factor. Greatest TV show of all times, jumping from one place to the other, overcoming their fear. What do we fear? What holds us back from really believing? Second to the last paragraph from the bottom, faith as confidence, not in a circumstance, but in a person. You could preach a whole sermon on that. And then page 28. Even though I love purpose-driven life, you know, all that stuff, I've written a couple of books on that. In the middle of that, page 28, where's your faith? You might want to consider this. It is about you. Rick Warren's book, Purpose-Driven Life, 35 million, 40 million copies, begins with the sentence, it's not about you. And in many ways that's true, but in other ways it is about you. Where is your faith? Where is your faith? What do you put your ultimate trust in? What do you look for as a bedrock foundation for the way that you approach life and faith? Read those paragraphs there. It is about you, about your response. We're Lutherans, so yes, it's all about Jesus, but part of it is about you. God has no grandchildren. We used to preach that, you know, years ago. How are you going to appropriate what Jesus wants to do for you? Daily reading notes on page 29. Keep a note in that. Take your book, take the Beyond Question video talks, and really I'm summarizing, really kind of flying through this. So let me just take some notes on the video talk. We're talking about page 7. Where is your faith? Where do you put your ultimate trust? If you have old people in your congregation, let's see. I think we have all old people. You can recall Willie, or whatever the guy's name was, in Death of a Salesman. I've got my insurance policy. That's what he put his ultimate trust in. Obviously, that wasn't enough to make it through life. Jesus stood up, said to the sea and waves, "Be calm, where is your faith?" Page on day 8. On day 8 in the book, let me just page through to that. Page 8 is the question of the 10 lepers. Why did no one return to give thanks? Fascinating as you preach on this, if you preach on this topic, the issue of gratitude. In the notes, the Beyond Question talk, I make reference to a gratitude journal. This is fascinating. When I was preaching this in 2012, I talked about a gratitude journal. Every morning, right, or more evening, or whatever it's say, there's a lot of different ways to do that, and some of them are in the Beyond Question talks. Just 2 months ago, a woman was talking at a Bible study, and she said, you know, my life has dramatically changed since I've been starting to keep a gratitude journal. I said, cool, tell me more about that. She said, well, every day, she told me the process. She told a group that she did, what she was doing in her gratitude journal was no one found to give thanks except this Samaritan. And after she talked about the gratitude journal, I said, so, wow, when did you start that? And she said, after you preached a sermon on it. I said, when was that? She said she'd been keeping a gratitude journal since I talked about it in that sermon, and she said it's made such a tremendous difference in her life because she started focusing on things every day for which she had gratitude. That's about the life application stuff. You provide touch points for people. One of the things too, when you're talking about the returning to give thanks, is if you focus on gratitude and things you're thankful for, what you avoid is cranky Christians. Oh my goodness. One of the things that drives me nuts the most is cranky Christians. We probably have them all at our church. Living with an attitude of gratitude transforms cranky Christians into gracious servants. We could all tell stories about cranky Christians, but wouldn't you like to have a congregation full of gracious servants? Servants of Christ, filled with gratitudes in their hearts for what God has done. Day 9. Day 9. Do you believe that I'm able to do this? In the book, on page 41, halfway down, you'll see that little sentence in italics, believing is seeing. Consider looking through the Beyond video notes on believing is seeing. There's a whole concept in that. If you believe that you will see something, if you believe that you will see God active in your life, it opens up your mind and heart to where God might be active. If you don't believe you can see something, chances are you ain't gonna see it. If you believe you can see something, if you believe something is going to come true, chances are much more likely that it will come true because you'll begin to act in that way, and in doing so, in changing your behavior, what you believe will often come true in what you see. We usually say, seeing is believing, I'll see it when I believe it. In the Christian life of faith, oftentimes believing is seeing. End of sermon for that. Day 10, do you know that I must be in my Father's house? There's the emphasis on the word must. Question of the fullness of life, must be in my Father's house. In the video notes, there's that story about the guy on the luxury liner and the cheese and crackers. The question is, are you living a cheese and crackers life? Not living with the full banquet that God has prepared for you. That is a super easy thing to preach. We live a life of scarcity. We live a life of scarcity far too often. Living a life of abundance and not a cheese and crackers life is the life that God calls us into. John 10:10. I come that you, dude, you might have life and have it abundantly. Day 11, about the speck in your neighbor's eye. Lots of things to do for that in the video notes. On day 12, how much longer will I put up with you? Read the behavioral results story that I tell on page 46 of the book. The fleas that jump. I mean, how often are we like that elephant with that small stake holding us back and not allowing us to move forward because we've learned. I tell a story in there about the importance of perspective. Think of, two of my favorite commercials of all time. One was a long time ago when, sing this with me because you probably all know it. Oh, I wish I were an Oscar Mayer wiener. I wish I was an Oscar Mayer wiener. That is what I'd truly love to be, because if I were an Oscar Mayer wiener, everyone would be in love with me. So Billy, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a weenie. You know, I mean, how often do we program ourselves for mediocrity? Program ourselves for mediocrity. The question is, do you know that I must be in my Father's house and see the speck in your Father's eye, must put up with you? All of that. Or the Super Bowl commercial a number of years back where the kids say, I want to be promoted to middle management. I want to be a yes man. I want to be down talked for my job. We program ourselves for mediocrity. That's not the life that God has in store for us. Let us then return to the worship helps. The worship helps, which are on page 30. Where is your faith? Where do you place your trust, hope, and faith? Read over that. Page 31. One of the fascinating, wonderful videos that you might want to show or have someone sing if they pluck the guitar is a Michael Card, Why? Amazing, beautiful song. There's a lot of other ones there too. So we're going to end this, we're going to go on to session 4, which is week 3. Who do you say that I am? The question of Christology. Who do you say that I am? It is on page 50 or 49 in the book. Who do you say that I am? The question of Christology. How you answer this question has eternal implications. If you say Jesus was a magician, he was a liar, lunatic, is he Lord? From the Alpha questions, it's a massive question, the question of Christology, and it's the 4th week. That's why we waited until this point to get to it on the 3rd week in Lent. Who do you say that I am encapsulates for you the entire gospel. You've preached on it before, obviously, many different times, but maybe look at it in a little bit of a different way during this season of Lent. There's possible outlines on page 34. Serious evaluation, personal confession, personal commitment. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there on those pages. Page 37. There's a YouTube video. It's an you might search for Airtran, Give Me Jesus, and it's this choir director on this flight gets his kids, college kids, they're spread out all over the place. It's kind of a flash mob. And except they don't move. They sing, give me Jesus, give me Jesus. It's unbelievably great. Brings tears to your eyes when you watch it. Consider showing that in worship. On page 37, the notes, who do you say that I am? Let me just skip back to the video talks on day 13. So day 13, you might want to, on the video talks, there's some good information on day 13. Who do you say that I am? You notice on day 13, it's from the Gospel of Mark. You could do a whole sermon very easily introducing this on the Messianic secret in the Gospel of Mark. How the beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, in 1:1, and then it goes underground. Who is this? Who is this? Who is this? There's many of those that are mentioned in the video talks that you can see for day 13. And then finally, it's the centurion at the foot of the cross with the blood, the sweat, and the death of Jesus. He says, man, truly, this was the Son of God. Day 14, do you not believe that I'm in the Father and the Father is in me? Think of the Burger King thing. We want Jesus our own way. We want to create Jesus in our image. I'll take that Jesus burger with a whole of ketchup and give me a bunch more mustard and pickles. We want to have Jesus in our own way. Well, the problem is we can't have Jesus our own way. He comes to us in His way. He's in control. He's in charge. He's asking us to transform our lives according to His will and way. That's on day 14. Day 15, about the glory of God. You can look in the video notes about how, excuse me for a second, still in the morning and I need a cup of coffee. Did I tell you that you would not believe the glory of, not see the glory of God? Notice in the Lazarus story, but that when Jesus heard that Lazarus had died, He waited. He stayed there for an extra day. He waited. You could preach easily on why did Jesus wait? I mean, for goodness sakes, Jesus, when you hear somebody's dying, you go right away. Jesus waited, perhaps because He wanted something to happen in the hearts of those to whom He was going when He would raise Lazarus, and then this miracle appeared in their hearts and they turned about, they transformed on their journey with God. Perhaps waiting is an extremely difficult thing for me. I mean, I can wait all day long if I know what the outcome will be, but the problem is it's difficult to wait when you don't know what the outcome will be. God put Noah on the ark, and then it was 7 days before the rain started. I mean, imagine Noah getting all pumped up, gets in the ark, I'm ready to go, God. God said, well, why don't you wait a week? You know, maybe God was doing something in the hearts of Noah and his family on the ark. Day 16. Day 16 is the story of Nicodemus. You know, how can these things be? That believe, belong, will become the child of God that God created me to be. You could make reference to that again on the notes. Also talk about that morning and evening experience that you can ask people to consider. Dear God, as you're brushing your teeth in the morning, let me trust you today. Let me trust you today. Let every decision that I make be reflecting my growing trust in you. In the evening, then consider looking back and where did you trust God that day? That's not being saved by works, not at all. It's instead putting yourself in a position where you can see the glory of God around you. Day 17, why don't you tell why do you not do what I tell you? That's obviously reflective in this whole series. Why don't we do what He tells us? Day 18, will you lay down your life for me? I personally love that story about that little girl at Stanford Medical Center and her brother who thought he was giving his life for her, and people realized he was willing to do that. Will you lay down your life for me? That ends that week. Next session, we'll look at sessions starting with session 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then hopefully this will be giving you some ways in which to preach this series. Once again, it's not, this whole series that I'm doing is not so much an exegetical exercise because you know how to do exegesis. You've been to seminary, you have a particular way of doing that, whatever that might be. But I hope you realize by this point that this whole beyond question thing is more of a concept than it is just this accumulation of knowledge. If it's going to be a personal, transformative journey through Lent, it means that it begins to transform the way that you see life in the world, the way that you approach issues, whether you're a learner or a judger. It involves your thinking and feeling and acting in that trilogy that engages the heart, the mind, and the hands. It's really more of a concept. So I hope you're beginning to see now how this concept is something you can start to tickle the brains of the people in your congregations and fan the flames of faith in their hearts and change their hearts and minds, draw them closer to God through a living relationship with the living and loving God. So we're part of the way through this. The next videos will draw us further into the next 4 weeks. Take care. Hope this is helpful. Please, please post notes on the Facebook page. What are you thinking about? Does this make sense? Post some individual questions. Post some songs that you think would be great. One woman just did that. What would be a theme song on the Facebook page? So let's engage with this material and see where it leads us. Take care. I will continue in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.